The simple girl who fed an old man's dog on the street, without knowing he was a disguised Chinese billionaire. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. We continue. The afternoon sun painted the Miami sky with orange hues as Lucy Richardson adjusted the tables at the Sunshine Cafe in the heart of South Beach. The 27-year-old young woman, with curly hair framing a face with delicate features, had been working as a waitress for 5 years to support her true passion, art. While arranging the chairs, she observed through the window the typical movement of that historic district, where tourists and locals mingled among the colorful facades of the Art Deco buildings. "Lucy, can you take this coffee to table 6? It's Mr. Wilson. He arrived with Rusty," said Mrs. Jenkins, the owner of the cafe, a 60-year-old lady who knew each customer by name. Lucy smiled at the mention of the old man and his rusty-colored dog. For months she had been observing that peculiar duo who punctually occupied the same table in the square across from the cafe. The man, with grey hair and simple clothes, seemed oblivious to the city's hustle and bustle, always absorbed in observing people or occasionally scribbling something in a worn notebook. The mutt, meanwhile, faithfully lay at his feet, receiving affection from passers-by. "Of course, Mrs. Jenkins, I'll take it right now," she replied, picking up the cup of black coffee without sugar that the man ordered every day. As she crossed the street toward the square, Lucy felt the typical Miami heat caress her tanned skin. The aroma of coffee mingled with the smell of fried food coming from nearby stands. As she approached, the dog raised its ears, recognizing her immediately. "Good afternoon, Mr. Wilson. Your coffee, as always," she said, placing the cup on the iron table. The gentleman, who appeared to be in his 70s, looked up from the notebook where he was drawing. His eyes, a deep brown, contained a liveliness that contrasted with the marks of time on his face. "Thank you, young lady. You're very kind," he replied with an accent that didn't seem local, perhaps from the Midwest or Northeast. Rusty wagged his tail and approached Lucy, who couldn't resist petting his head. "He likes you," commented the gentleman, discreetly closing the notebook. "And I like him," she replied, noticing the movement. "Do you draw?" Wilson smiled enigmatically. "Just scribbles from an old man without much to do. And you? You've been working at the cafe for quite some time, haven't you? I always observe you serving customers with such attention." The observation caught Lucy by surprise. She hadn't imagined that the man noticed her as much as she noticed him. "Yes, it's been 5 years. It's what pays the bills while I try to make my art happen." The old man's eyes sparkled with interest. "You're an artist?" "I try to be," she replied with a shy smile. "I paint canvases, do some collages, experiment with recycled materials, nothing the world has discovered yet." At that moment, a group of tourists passed by noisily, catching Rusty's attention, who barked excitedly. "I need to get back to work," said Lucy, indicating the cafe. "It was good talking to you." "The pleasure was mine. Perhaps one day you'll show me your art," replied Wilson, sipping his coffee. In the following weeks, that brief conversation transformed into a daily ritual. Lucy began sitting with Wilson during her breaks, bringing small treats for Rusty, who already greeted her with leaps of joy. The old man, previously taciturn, revealed himself to be an excellent listener and conversationalist, with a wisdom that fascinated the young woman. On a particularly quiet afternoon, Lucy arrived home, a small apartment in the Wynwood district, that she shared with her friend Tanya Oliver, an African dance teacher. The space, although cramped, overflowed with colors and textures. The walls were covered with unfinished canvases, and various artistic materials were scattered everywhere. "You seem different today," commented Tanya, who was preparing tea in the small kitchenette. Tall, with colorful braids and contagious energy, she had known Lucy since childhood in the suburbs of Miami. "I met someone interesting," replied Lucy, dropping her bag on the worn sofa. "That gentleman from the square, you know? The one with the rusty dog. We've been talking for a few weeks." Tanya raised an eyebrow. "The mysterious old man who always observes everyone." "So did you discover who he is?" "Not exactly," admitted Lucy, taking a cup. "But he understands so much about art, Tanya. Today he commented on painting techniques that I had never heard of. He seems to know every artistic movement as if he had lived through all of them. Interesting, murmured Tanya, blowing on the hot tea. And he never said anything about his past? Where he's from? What he did? Before? Not much. I know his name is Anthony Wilson, that he came from New York a few years ago, and that he lives alone with Rusty in a house in Little Havana. He always changes the subject when I ask more. Mystery, Tanya joked, making a dramatic voice. Maybe he's a famous artist hiding from the paparazzi, or an eccentric millionaire. Lucy laughed, throwing a pillow at her friend. Don't be silly, he's just a kind gentleman who likes to talk about art. That night, while working on a new canvas in her small improvised studio on the balcony, Lucy couldn't get out of her head the precise comments that Anthony had made about her technique. It was as if he could see exactly what she was trying to express, even when she herself wasn't sure. The next day, armed with courage and carrying a folder with some of her sketches, Lucy approached Anthony's table during her break. I brought some things to show you if you'd like to see, she said, sitting beside him. The old man adjusted his reading glasses and opened the folder carefully. His fingers, marked by time but still firm, turned the pages with reverence. He studied each sketch in silence, occasionally nodding or murmuring something inaudible. You have a rare gift, Lucy, he said finally, looking into her eyes. It's not just technique, which can be learned, but something that can't be taught. Your ability to capture the essence, the soul of things. Lucy felt her face flush with the unexpected compliment. Thank you, but I still have so much to learn. We all do, he replied with a serene smile. Art is a journey without a final destination. The important thing is to keep walking. Rusty, sensing the emotion in the air, rested his head on Lucy's knee, as if he also wanted to participate in that moment. You know, continued Anthony, closing the folder carefully, there's a visual arts competition happening soon here in Miami, the New Talents Festival of Florida. You should participate. Me? No, I'm not at that level, replied Lucy, shaking her head. Those are professional artists, people with academic training, connections. And you have something that many of them lost along the way. Authenticity, interrupted Anthony, with surprising firmness in his usually gentle voice. Promise me you'll think about it. Before she could respond, Mrs. Jenkins called her back to work. With a quick wave, Lucy said goodbye, leaving Anthony with his thoughts and Rusty with a final pat. As she returned to the cafe, she didn't notice the man in a suit who was observing Anthony from a distance, speaking discreetly on the phone. I found him, Dr. Reynolds. He's here in South Beach, exactly as we suspected. The New Talents Festival of Florida was more than a simple art competition. It represented one of the main gateways for emerging artists onto the national scene. Colorful posters announcing the event began appearing throughout Miami, including in the window of the Sunshine Cafe, where Lucy couldn't avoid looking at them with a mixture of desire and apprehension. Still thinking about the competition? Asked Mrs. Jenkins, surprising Lucy while she stared at the poster for the umpteenth time. It's too presumptuous of me, Mrs. Jenkins. There are people with fine arts degrees, artists who have already exhibited in galleries. The lady rested, her hands on her broad hips. And since when do you need a diploma to have talent, girl? Mr. Wilson can't stop talking about your works. I've never seen that man so excited about something since he started frequenting my cafe. Lucy felt her heart race. In recent days, her conversations with the old man had become the highlight of her afternoons. He seemed to understand her art in a way that no one else could, as if he could see through the layers of paint to find the emotions she was trying to express. Speaking of the devil, muttered Mrs. Jenkins with a smile, looking out the window. Anthony had just arrived with Rusty, but today he seemed different. He walked with difficulty, leaning on a cane that Lucy had never seen before. The dog, always attentive, walked more slowly, as if understanding his owner's condition. I'll take his coffee, said Lucy, already preparing the cup. As she approached the table, she noticed that the old man's face was paler than normal. Mr. Wilson, are you all right? He looked up and for a moment seemed not to recognize her. Then his eyes lit up with his characteristic smile. Ah, Lucy, Just a little pain in the joints. Nothing a good coffee won't help improve. She placed the cup on the table and sat down, concerned. Are you sure? You look tired. The years don't forgive, my young friend, he replied with a sigh. But I didn't come here to talk about my ailments. So, have you decided about the festival? Lucy looked away to the square, where children played under the watchful eyes of their mothers. I don't know, Mr. Wilson. What if I make a fool of myself? What if no one understands what I want to express? What if they do, he countered, leaning forward. What if your art touches just one person the way it touched me? Wouldn't that be enough? Rusty, as if wanting to participate in the conversation, rested his head on Lucy's knee. She smiled, caressing the dog's soft ears. Can I tell you a story? Asked Anthony, taking a sip of coffee. Many years ago I knew a talented young artist like you. She had vision, had passion, but lacked confidence. When I finally convinced her to show her work, she discovered that her art wasn't just for her. It was a gift to the world. And what happened to her? Anthony's gaze was lost in some distant point. She flourished, became one of the most important artists of her generation. You seem to know a lot of people from the art world, commented Lucy, intrigued. For an instant, a shadow crossed the old man's face. I've lived many lives, Lucy, met many people along the way. Before she could ask more, a tall and elegantly dressed man approached the table. He appeared to be in his 40s, with grey hair at the temples and a bearing that exuded authority. Finally found you, uncle, he said, staring at Anthony with a mixture of relief and irritation. Lucy looked confused from one to the other. Anthony sighed deeply, as if he had been caught in mischief. Robert, what a surprise, he replied dryly. Lucy, this is my nephew Robert Wilson. Robert, this is Lucy Richardson, an extraordinary artist. The man barely looked at her, focused on his uncle. We need to talk in private. Anything you need to tell me can be said in front of my friend, replied Anthony with surprising firmness. Robert pressed his lips, visibly annoyed. As you wish. I'm here because the board is in an uproar. The foundation can't drift while... You did have fun in Miami. Lucy felt uncomfortable, as if she were witnessing something she shouldn't. Maybe I should get back to work. No, Anthony gently touched her arm. Please stay. Robert is just leaving. Isn't that right, nephew? The two men stared at each other in a silent confrontation of wills. Finally, Robert backed down. My reservation at the Ritz-Carlton ends tomorrow. I expect to see you before that. He turned to Lucy with a stiff nod and walked away with firm steps. A heavy silence fell over the table. Rusty, sensing the tension, let out a small whimper. I apologize for that, Anthony finally said. Family matters are always complicated. Foundation? Asked Lucy, unable to contain her curiosity. The old man made a vague gesture with his hand. A small organization that I helped found many years ago. Nothing important. It was evident that there was much more to that story, but Anthony's visible discomfort prevented her from insisting. Instead, she changed the subject. I brought something to show you, she said, taking a small framed sketch from her bag. It was a portrait of Anthony and Rusty sitting on the park bench, captured with quick but expressive strokes. A thank you for all the inspiration you've given me. The old man's face lit up upon seeing the drawing. With slightly trembling hands, he held the frame, studying every detail. It's magnificent, Lucy. Truly magnificent. For a moment, Lucy thought she saw tears in his eyes, but Anthony quickly composed himself. You know what this tells me? He asked, still admiring the drawing. That you're more than ready for the festival. In fact, I have a proposal for you. In Lucy's apartment, Tanya was dancing around the living room to the sound of African music, while her friend recounted the day's events. So the mysterious old man has a fancy nephew and a foundation? Asked Tanya, stopping her dance. I told you there was more to this story. Yes, but I couldn't find out what foundation it is, replied Lucy, working on a new canvas, inspired by her conversation with Anthony. And his proposal was even more surprising. Tell me already, woman, exclaimed Tanya, sitting on the floor beside her friend. He offered to be my mentor for the festival. Said he can help me prepare a portfolio, choose the right works, even write the presentation text. Tanya's eyes widened. And you accepted, right? I accepted, but I'm still trying to understand why he's so interested in helping me. Maybe he sees in you what you still can't see, suggested Tanya, surprisingly serious. That night, while working on her registration for the festival, Lucy couldn't stop thinking about the mysterious Anthony Wilson and his unexpected connection with her. There was something familiar about him, as if she already knew him from somewhere, although she was sure they had never met before the afternoons in South Beach. Determined to better understand who her new mentor was, she typed his name into her phone's search engine. To her surprise, she found dozens of results. She clicked on the first link, a profile in a digital encyclopedia of American art. Anthony Wilson, 1952, one of the most influential visual artists and patrons of contemporary American art. Founder of the Wilson Foundation for the Arts, responsible for launching some of the most promising careers on the national art scene in the last 3 decades. The description continued, but Lucy could no longer read. The photo next to the text showed a younger man in an elegant suit at a vernissage, but unmistakably the same Mr. Wilson, who every day drank simple coffee in the South Beach Square with his mutt. My God, she murmured, letting the phone fall onto the bed. Who are you really, Mr. Wilson? At the luxurious Ritz-Carlton, Robert Wilson was speaking on the phone while observing Biscayne Bay through the window of his suite. Yes, I found my uncle, he said in a controlled tone, but it won't be easy to convince him to come back. He seems involved with something here, or rather with someone. He paused, listening. A young local artist, he's fascinated with her. I think I see an opportunity here, but I'll need more time. Meanwhile, in the small house in Little Havana, Anthony Wilson contemplated the sketch that Lucy had given him, with Rusty sleeping at his feet. He opened a drawer and removed a yellowed envelope. From inside, he took out an old photograph of a young woman smiling in front of a canvas. She reminds me so much of you, Teresa, he whispered to the photo. The same fire in her eyes, the same pure passion for art. He carefully put away the photograph and looked at Lucy's drawing again. This time, I'll do everything differently, I promise. The morning light invaded the small improvised studio. On the balcony of Lucy's apartment, brushes, paints, and canvases spread around formed an organized chaos that only she understood. She had spent the night awake, alternating between researching Anthony Wilson and frantically working on new pieces for the festival. The discovery of her friend's true identity had triggered a storm of emotions. Anthony wasn't just a friendly gentleman who liked coffee. He was one of the biggest names in American visual arts, an internationally respected collector, and founder of one of the most important institutions supporting art in the country. Did you sleep at all? Asked Tanya, appearing at the balcony door with 2 cups of coffee. Lucy accepted the drink with gratitude. Almost nothing. I couldn't stop thinking. And what are you going to do? Confront him? I don't know, she admitted, looking at the canvas she had just finished, an abstract composition in shades of blue and gold that captured the duality she now saw in Anthony. Why would he hide who he is? Why pretend to be just an ordinary old man? Tanya sat in the only available chair, carefully moving aside a paint container. Maybe he's tired of being Anthony Wilson, the great patron. Maybe he just wants to be Mr. Wilson, the old man with the rusty dog. Tanya's observation echoed in Lucy's mind during the entire journey to the Sunshine Cafe. It was her day off, but she had arranged to meet Anthony to discuss her registration for the festival. Each step toward South Beach brought more questions. Should she confront him? Pretend she didn't know? She felt betrayed, but at the same time intrigued. What did a man like him see in her simple art? Upon arriving at the square, she noticed that Anthony wasn't in his usual place. Instead, she found only Rusty, tied to the leg of the bench, who barked happily upon seeing her. Hi, buddy, she said, petting the dog. Where's your owner? He asked to wait here with you, said a voice behind her. It was Robert, Anthony's nephew, wearing an impeccable suit that seemed out of place in the casual South Beach environment. Lucy stood up, uncomfortable. Did something happen to Mr. Wilson? Robert studied her for a moment, as if assessing the value of a work of art. "My uncle is fine. He asked me to give you this." He extended a thick paper envelope with her name written in elegant calligraphy. Confused, Lucy accepted the envelope. "Isn't he coming?" "He had a setback." He apologized for the inconvenience. Robert's tone was polite, but there was something calculating in his gaze. "You really didn't know who he is, did you?" The question caught her off guard. "Fascinating," murmured Robert, more to himself. "My uncle always had a special talent for finding uncut diamonds." He consulted his expensive wristwatch. "I need to go. I'm sure we'll see each other again, Ms. Richardson." With a short nod, he walked away, leaving Lucy alone with Rusty and her unanswered questions. The dog whimpered, as if sharing her confusion. "Come on, friend," she said, untying the leash. "Let's find your owner." The envelope in her hands weighed like lead. She sat on the bench and carefully opened it. Inside was a card with an address in Little Havana and a simple message: "Come visit." There's much we need to talk about. Bring Rusty. A.W." Her hands trembled slightly as she put the card in her purse. The idea of confronting Anthony on his own territory intimidated her, but her curiosity was stronger. With Rusty walking obediently by her side, she headed to the bus stop. The Little Havana neighborhood, with its steep streets and colorful houses, held an air of mystery. Following the address, Lucy expected to find an imposing mansion, worthy of a man of Anthony Wilson's stature. Instead, she stopped in front of a modest house with a faded blue facade and a small porch protected by a wrought-iron railing. Before she could knock, the door opened. Anthony appeared, without the cane, wearing a simple shirt and linen pants. "Yuha." "Came," he said, with a smile that didn't hide a certain nervousness. "And you brought my companion, thank you." Rusty ran inside, familiar with the environment. Lucy remained on the threshold, unsure. "Please, come in," invited Anthony, opening the door wider. The interior of the house was surprisingly simple. Old furniture, but without ostentation, walls with some framed engravings, books piled on tables. The only indication of the owner's true identity was a small sculpture on a sideboard, a piece that Lucy immediately recognized as the work of Louise Nevelson. "Would you like some tea?" offered Anthony, indicating the sofa. "I prefer answers," replied Lucy, still standing. "Why did you lie to me, Mr. Wilson? Or should I call you Mr. Wilson, the famous patron of American art?" The old man sighed, running his hand through his gray hair. "I didn't lie, Lucy. I merely omitted parts of my past. Please sit down. The story is long." Reluctantly, she obeyed. Rusty came to lie at her feet, as if wanting to offer moral support. 3 years ago," Anthony began, sitting in a worn leather armchair, "I suffered a heart attack while participating in an auction in New York. It was enlightening, let's say. While I was in the hospital, surrounded by people who only cared about my money and influence, I realized that I had lost something essential along the way." "What?" asked Lucy, her initial resentment giving way to curiosity. "Authenticity. The same quality that I saw in you from the first moment." His eyes met hers with disarming sincerity. "I decided to step away. I left the management of the foundation in Robert's hands, took some savings, and came to Miami to start over." "Why hide who you were from me?" Anthony smiled sadly. "At first it wasn't intentional. I was just an anonymous old man having coffee. And you were a kind young woman who brought my cup. But when we started talking about art, when I saw your work," he paused, choosing his words, "I feared that the celebrity Anthony Wilson would overshadow what we were building. I feared that you would change your way of being with me." Lucy absorbed his words in silence. Part of her understood his motivation, but another part still felt deceived. "And now?" she finally asked. "Why did you decide to reveal the truth?" "Because I want to help you, Lucy. Not as an anonymous mentor, but as someone who can really open doors." He stood up and walked to a bookshelf from which he retrieved a folder. "Your registration for the festival is ready. It just needs your signature." She took the folder, opening it carefully. The documents were impeccably filled out with a selection of professional photographs of her works, photos that she didn't remember having taken. "How did you get these photos?" "Robert has his talents," admitted Anthony with a slight smile. "He may seem cold, but he's extremely efficient." Lucy leafed through the documents, impressed with the professional presentation. "Why are you doing this for me? There are so many talented artists in Miami." Anthony hesitated, a visible conflict on his face. Then, with slow steps, he headed to a side door that Lucy hadn't noticed before. "Come with me. There's something I need to show you." The room was small, illuminated by a skylight that bathed the space with natural light. Unlike the rest of the house here, there was no simplicity. It was a complete studio with easels, imported paints, and sculpting tools. On the walls, canvases in different stages of completion revealed the hand of a master. "You still paint?" whispered Lucy, amazed. "The artist never really retires," replied Anthony, walking to a cabinet in the corner. "But that's not what I want to show you." From a locked drawer, he removed an intricately carved wooden box. He placed it on a table and opened it reverently. Inside, protected by silk fabric, was a framed photograph. "This is Teresa," he said, handing the frame to Lucy. "My wife." The key photograph showed a young, radiant woman with brushes in hand, in front of a huge canvas. There was something familiar about her that Lucy couldn't identify. She was a painter. "One of the most brilliant I've ever known," confirmed Anthony. His voice choked with emotion. "Teresa had a special gift for capturing people's souls in her canvases. We met in art school long before I became a known name." Lucy studied the photograph, noticing the date in the corner, 1978. "What happened to her?" Anthony took a deep breath as if gathering strength. "Teresa fell ill when we were starting our careers. A brain tumor. The doctors gave her 6 months, but she fought for 2 years. His eyes shone with contained tears. "Before she left, she made me promise 2 things, that I would never stop painting, and that I would use my influence to help young talents not face the same difficulties we did." "The Wilson Foundation?" concluded Lucy, finally understanding. "Yes, I created the foundation in her memory. For years I kept my promise, but with time—" his voice faltered. "With time, I lost the original purpose. I became a collector. A name, a brand. The foundation became a business, not a mission. And then you came to Miami." Anthony nodded, taking back the photograph with delicacy. "To rediscover who I was, and that's when I found you." He looked directly into Lucy's eyes. "You have the same fire that Teresa had, the same artistic purity. When I saw your work, it was like you were seeing her again," completed Lucy, finally understanding the connection she had felt from the beginning. A silence charged with emotion filled the small studio. Outside, the sun was beginning to set, casting orange shadows through the skylight. "And now?" Lucy asked softly. "Now," replied Anthony, carefully closing the box with the photograph, "you decide if you want my help, knowing who I really am." She looked around at the unfinished canvases, at the tools of a master, at the man who had found something in her that not even she fully recognized. "With one condition," she finally said, "that you return to being Anthony Wilson, the artist. Not just the patron, not just the famous name, that you return to creating." A slow smile illuminated the old man's face. "It's a fair deal." That night, as she returned home with the signed registration folder, Lucy felt different, as if she had found not just a mentor, but a connection to something greater than herself, an artistic lineage, a purpose that transcended her own ambitions. In the luxurious apartment at the Ritz-Carlton, Robert Wilson observed the bay lights. Through the panoramic window, a glass of whiskey in hand. His cell phone rang, showing an international number. "The documents are signed," he said upon answering. "My uncle finally agreed to participate on the board again." He paused, listening. "Yes, but with an unexpected condition. He wants to bring a protégé, a local artist." Another silence. "Trust me, this could be exactly what we needed to revitalize the foundation's image. A story of discovery, of returning to roots." He smiled, satisfied with himself. Leave it to me. I have everything under control." Upon hanging up, his eyes fell on a newspaper open on the coffee table with the headline prominently displayed, "New Talents Festival of Florida, the new showcase of American art." Below, in smaller letters, rumors indicate the presence of the reclusive patron Anthony Wilson among the judges. The plan was just beginning. The weeks that followed passed in a whirlwind for Lucy. Anthony's studio had become her second home, a sanctuary where mentor and apprentice worked side by side, sharing techniques, ideas, and stories. To her surprise, the revelation of the old man's true identity hadn't created a gulf between them, but rather deepened their connection. More freedom in the wrist, Anthony guided, watching her work on a large canvas that would be her centerpiece for the festival. Let the paint breathe, Lucy. It knows where it wants to go. The work, titled Encounters, was a bold composition that mixed figurative and abstract elements. It represented South Beach Square seen through overlapping layers of reality and emotion. At the center, subtly inserted, the silhouettes of an old man and a young woman shared a bench, while a rusty-colored dog rested at their feet. "It's almost ready," murmured Lucy, stepping back to evaluate her work. "Something's missing, but I don't know exactly what." Anthony contemplated the canvas in silence, his experienced eyes catching nuances that others wouldn't see. "Courage is missing," he finally said. "You're still holding back, afraid to reveal too much." "How can I reveal what I don't even fully understand myself?" she asked, cleaning her hands on a cloth. "That's the beauty of true art, my dear. It not only expresses what we know, but helps us discover what we don't yet know." Anthony's constant presence in her life had brought more than just artistic guidance. With him, Lucy had learned about the history of American art through the eyes of someone who had intensely experienced it. She had heard behind-the-scenes stories of great exhibitions, the dramas and triumphs of legendary artists, many of whom had been personal friends of her mentor. In exchange, she had brought back to the old artist something he thought lost, the passion for creation. After years dedicated only to collecting and financing others' art, Anthony had returned to painting with renewed vigor. His style, previously rigorously formalist, now incorporated a spontaneity that surprised even himself. "You freed me, Lucy," he confessed one afternoon, while they worked side by side. "I had forgotten what it's like to create without thinking about the market, the critics, posterity." The news that the legendary Anthony Wilson was back in Miami and would participate in the New Talents Festival of Florida as a special judge spread quickly through the city's artistic circles. Suddenly, the event gained a national dimension, attracting attention from specialized media and exponentially increasing the competition. "Did you see this?" asked Tanya, throwing an arts magazine on the breakfast table. "The festival has become the talk of the town, and look who's here." On the open page, an article highlighted the 10 emerging artists to watch. In fifth place, to Lucy's astonishment, was her name, accompanied by a photo she didn't remember taking. "How did they get that?" she asked, stunned. Tanya rolled her eyes. "Your powerful godfather, obviously. The question is, does this help or hurt your chances?" It was a question that also tormented Lucy. On one hand, the association with Anthony guaranteed her visibility. On the other, it fueled rumors of favoritism. On social media, malicious comments were already circulating about Wilson's protégé and questions about her real talent. "Don't let that affect you," Anthony had advised when she mentioned her concern. "I've spent decades being judged by my connections, my money, everything except my art. In the end, what remains is the work. If it's honest, it will find its way." That morning, as she walked to Anthony's studio, Lucy was approached by an elegant woman who was getting out of an imported car parked near her mentor's house. "Lucy Richardson?" asked the stranger, extending her hand. "I'm Claire Vanderbilt, director of Horizon Gallery in New York. I'd like to talk about your work." Caught by surprise, Lucy shook the offered hand. "How do you know who I am?" Claire smiled, her eyes evaluating Lucy as if she were merchandise. "All of Miami is talking about Anthony Wilson's protégé. I'm in town for the festival and would love to see your works before the big debut." "They're not ready for exhibition yet," replied Lucy, uncomfortable with the direct approach. "I understand." Claire removed a card from her designer handbag. "When they are, get in touch. Horizon is always looking for new talents to represent." She made a calculated pause, "especially those with interesting connections." Lucy automatically accepted the card, feeling a bitter taste in her mouth. It was exactly the kind of opportunism she feared attracting. "Thank you, but I prefer that my work speaks for itself." "Admirable," replied Claire with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "But in this world, dear, the work rarely speaks louder than the right connections." With a short nod, she returned to her car. When Lucy entered the studio, she found Anthony in a heated discussion with Robert. The two men fell silent immediately upon seeing her. "Good morning, Lucy," greeted Robert with forced politeness. We're just talking about you." "I hope good things," she replied, trying to ease the palpable tension in the environment. Anthony approached, visibly irritated with his nephew. "Robert has some ideas about your participation in the festival that I don't agree with. He thinks we should use our connection to maximize exposure." "What my uncle is trying to say," intervened Robert, adjusting his impeccable tie, "is that we have a unique opportunity to transform your debut at the festival into something much bigger. The Wilson Foundation could sponsor an exclusive parallel exhibition just for you, with national media coverage. And I said that would be precisely the kind of favoritism that would harm Lucy in the long run," completed Anthony firmly. Lucy looked from one to the other, feeling like a piece in a chess game she didn't fully understand. "I appreciate the offer, Robert, but I prefer to follow the same path as any other festival participant." Robert studied her for a moment, with a mixture of irritation and curiosity. "You two are more alike than you imagine," he finally commented, "so idealistically stubborn." "I prefer to call it integrity," retorted Anthony. With an exasperated sigh, Robert checked his watch. "I need to go. I have a meeting with the festival sponsors in half an hour." He turned to Lucy. "Think about what I said. My offer still stands." When Robert left, Lucy showed Claire's card to Anthony. "I was approached by her on the street. It seems I'm already a potential investment." Anthony examined the card with a grave expression. "Claire is a shark in the gallery world. She signs predatory contracts with young artists and discards them when they're no longer novelties." He returned the card. "This is exactly what I feared when revealing myself as your mentor." "I don't care what they say," affirmed Lucy, although a part of her felt deeply bothered. "I just want them to see my art, not my connections." "And so they will," assured Anthony, gently squeezing her shoulder. "But first, we have work to do. The festival is just 2 weeks away." The days that followed were ones of intense work. Lucy refined her main works while Anthony worked on a series of his own, the first he had produced in years, with the intention of exhibiting publicly. They had decided that he would also participate in the festival, not as a judge, but as a special guest artist, presenting new works alongside the emerging talents. "This diverts part of the attention from you," he had explained, "and shows the world that I'm returning to my roots, not just patronizing new talents." The idea was brilliant in its simplicity. Instead of hiding their connection, they transformed it into a powerful narrative. The master who rediscovers his passion by mentoring a new generation, a complete circle in the artistic journey. On a particularly productive afternoon, while Lucy was putting the finishing touches on Encounters, Anthony received a call that left him visibly disturbed. "What? When?" he asked, his voice tense. "Yes, I'm going there right now." "Did something happen?" asked Lucy, concerned about her mentor's sudden paleness. Anthony hung up the phone with trembling hands. "Rusty. He's gone. A neighbor who usually feeds him when I'm here at the studio said he escaped through the gate when the delivery man arrived." "Let's look for him," said Lucy immediately, putting down her brushes. "He can't have gone far." The following hours were spent in frantic search through the streets of Little Havana. Anthony, despite his age, searched every alley and hill calling for his faithful companion, with Lucy by his side. As the sun set, the desperation grew. "He's never disappeared like this before," lamented Anthony, sitting exhausted on a park bench. Rusty is old, doesn't see well, he needs me. Seeing her friend's anguish, Lucy made a decision. She took her cell phone and called Tanya. I need help. Mr. Wilson's dog has disappeared and we're desperate. After explaining the situation, she hung up with renewed hope. Tanya is going to organize a search party with the people from her dance school. We'll find him, I promise. The mobilization was impressive. In less than an hour, dozens of young dancers, many of whom were neighborhood residents, spread through the streets with photos of Rusty. The news that the dog of the famous Anthony Wilson was missing spread quickly, and soon merchants, residents, and even local police joined the search. Near midnight, when Anthony was almost out of strength, Lucy's phone rang. It was Tanya. We found him. He's in South Beach Square under our bench. The reunion was emotional. Rusty, frightened but unharmed, had traveled all the distance to the place where he used to sit with Anthony every afternoon. Upon seeing his owner, the dog jumped for joy, licking his face while the old man hugged him, not hiding his tears. Thank you, said Anthony, looking at the group of young people who had gathered around. I will never forget what you did for me today. Back at Anthony's house, with Rusty safely settled in his bed, Lucy realized that something had changed. The shared experience had created an even deeper bond between her and her mentor, no longer just an artistic connection, but something that resembled a chosen family. You know what I realized today, said Anthony, serving 2 cups of tea. That despite all my supposed prestige and influence, it was ordinary people, the young people of the neighborhood, who really made a difference when I needed it. The connections that really matter aren't the ones that appear in art magazines, agreed Lucy. That night, inspired by the experience, Lucy returned to the studio and made a crucial alteration to Encounters. In the center of the composition, where before there were only silhouettes, now the figures of Anthony, Rusty, and herself were clearly distinguished, surrounded by a diverse community, the faces of those who had mobilized to find a simple mutt. Now it's complete, she murmured to herself, contemplating the work in the soft lamplight. What Lucy didn't know was that at the Ritz-Carlton, Robert Wilson had just concluded a confidential meeting with Claire Vanderbilt. On the table between them, contracts and documents awaited signatures. So it's settled, said Claire, closing her leather portfolio. After the festival, regardless of the result, Horizon Gallery will make an irrefusable offer to your uncle's protégé. And in exchange, asked Robert, although he already knew the answer. In exchange, the Wilson Foundation will have exclusivity in the partnership with our international network of galleries for the next 5 years. Claire smiled, satisfied. Everyone wins. Everyone except my uncle and the girl if they discover our agreement, observed Robert dryly. Claire shrugged, indifferent. Business is business, darling, and in this world even the purest art has its price. The Museum of Modern Art of Florida buzzed with activity. 2 days before the official opening of the New Talents Festival, staff and volunteers rushed to finalize the installation setups, while nervous artists supervised the positioning of their works. The imposing building on the edge of Biscayne Bay, with its modernist architecture, would be the stage for what was already being called the art event of the year in specialized media. Lucy observed, fascinated, as technicians carefully installed encounters on the main wall of the space, designated for new artists. The canvas, larger than anything she had ever produced before, seemed to take on new life under the professional lighting. Impressive, commented a female voice behind her. The composition has a kinetic energy that perfectly captures the pulse of Miami. Turning around, Lucy met a middle-aged woman, grey hair cut in an elegant bob, and perceptive eyes behind colourful framed glasses. She immediately recognized her as Helen Martin, the renowned curator and art critic, president of the festival jury. "Thank you," replied Lucy, feeling simultaneously honoured and intimidated. "It's my first exhibition in a space like this." Helen smiled, her eyes never leaving the canvas. "You wouldn't be Anthony Wilson's protégé, would you? Your work has some influences from him, but there's something distinctly yours here, a freshness, an authenticity that is rare nowadays." Before Lucy could respond, the curator continued. You know, I met Anthony in the 80s, when he still painted regularly. There was a purity in his work before the business world absorbed him. She looked directly at Lucy. It's good to see him back on the path of creation, thanks to you. How do you know it was thanks to me? Asked Lucy, surprised. Helen laughed softly. The art world is small, dear, and Anthony Wilson emerging from his self-imposed exile to mentor an unknown young artist. It's the kind of story that travels fast. She gestured toward the canvas. Besides, there's something in the way you portrayed him here, with dignity, but also vulnerability. Only someone who truly knows him could capture that. The conversation was interrupted by Robert's arrival, impeccably dressed as always, accompanied by a team of assistants. Dr. Martin, what a pleasure to meet you, he greeted with studied effusiveness. I see you've already met our rising star. Helen nodded dryly, her tone changing to something more formal. Mr. Wilson. Yes, we were having a fascinating conversation about authenticity in contemporary art. Always a relevant theme, replied Robert with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Lucy, I need to steal you for a moment. There are some people I'd like you to meet. With an apology to the curator, Lucy followed Robert to a group of well-dressed people gathered in the main hall. Sponsors, he whispered. Extremely important for your future, smile and be charming. The following hours were a whirlwind of introductions, superficial conversations, and business cards exchanged. Businessmen, collectors, gallery directors, all seemed eager to meet Anthony Wilson's new discovery. Lucy struggled to remain authentic amid the flattery, but increasingly felt like a product being sold. When she finally managed to escape, she found Anthony in a quiet corner of the museum, contemplating the space where his new works would be exhibited, a series of smaller canvases that explored fragmented memories of his life, including subtle portraits of Teresa. How are you feeling? She asked, joining him. Strangely nervous, he admitted with a shy smile. Like a novice. Despite all these decades, exhibiting again is like revealing a part of the soul that I've kept hidden for a long time. Lucy gently squeezed his hand. I completely understand. Since I arrived, I've had the feeling of being dissected by strangers. The price of visibility, sighed Anthony. I remember Teresa saying something similar at her first important exhibition. She hated the politics of the art world, the power games, the hidden agendas. He paused, looking at Lucy seriously. Never lose sight of why you create, Lucy. When everything else becomes noise, it's the only anchor that remains. At that moment, they were interrupted by a photographer from Art America magazine, eager to capture the master and his protégé together. Reluctantly, they posed for some photos, aware that they were feeding exactly the kind of narrative both wanted to avoid. The irony, murmured Anthony as the photographer walked away, is that I tried to escape this circus by coming to Miami and ended up bringing it with me and worse, dragging you into it. You didn't drag me, Lucy corrected firmly. I entered with open eyes. The rest of the day was dedicated to the final adjustments to the exhibition. By dusk, exhausted but satisfied, Lucy and Anthony walked along the Biscayne Bay waterfront, enjoying the sea breeze and the orange-tinged sky. Rusty, now inseparable from both, trotted happily ahead. Day after tomorrow everything changes, commented Anthony, contemplating the horizon. Regardless of the festival's outcome, you'll be a recognized artist with all the good and bad that brings. I'm ready, replied Lucy, although a part of her wondered if she was really prepared for the whirlwind that was approaching. Upon returning to Lucy's apartment, they found Tanya and a group of friends preparing a small pre-festival celebration. Surprise! Exclaimed Tanya, hugging her friend. We thought you two deserved a night of relaxation before the madness begins. The small living room was decorated with balloons and improvised banners. On the table, plates of typical Miami food and a bottle of cheap champagne waited to be shared. Tanya's friends, dancers, musicians, and local artists received Anthony with warm respect, without the intimidating reverence that normally accompanied his name. A toast, proposed Tanya, raising her glass after everyone was served. To Lucy and Mr. Wilson, May the festival be just the beginning of a partnership that will revolutionize American art. While everyone toasted and chatted animatedly, Lucy noticed that Anthony had moved away to the balcony. She found him looking at the illuminated city with a contemplative expression. "Any problem?" she asked, joining him. "None," he replied, turning to her with a genuine smile. "On the contrary, I was just thinking about how surprising life is. A year ago, I was a lonely old man drinking coffee in a square. Now," he gestured toward the room full of vibrant young people, "now I have this. I have you." There was a softness in his words that touched Lucy deeply. For a moment, she wondered if what she felt for Anthony surpassed the master-apprentice relationship, approaching something more complex, not romantic, but a connection of souls that transcended simple categories. The night advanced with music, stories, and laughter. To everyone's surprise, Anthony revealed himself to be an excellent storyteller, sharing hilarious anecdotes about the behind-the-scenes of the art world that kept everyone entertained. Near midnight, when the small party was beginning to disperse, Anthony's phone rang. His expression changed upon seeing the number. "Robert," he briefly explained before answering and moving away to the kitchen. Lucy tried not to pay attention, but it was impossible not to notice that the conversation seemed tense. When Anthony returned, his expression was grave. "I need to go," he said, taking his coat, "and the unforeseen issue related to the exhibition has come up." "Something serious?" asked Lucy, concerned. "I hope not," he replied, trying to sound unconcerned. "Robert tends to dramatize, probably just some last-minute bureaucratic detail." After saying goodbye to everyone and thanking them for the welcome, Anthony left with Rusty, promising to meet Lucy at the museum in the morning for the final adjustments. When everyone had left and Tanya was already asleep, Lucy remained awake, an inexplicable restlessness disturbing her sleep. Something in Anthony's behavior after the phone call had left her apprehensive. Yielding to impulse, she took her cell phone and called him. The call went straight to voicemail. Worried, she quickly got dressed and called a taxi. It was almost 1 a.m. when she arrived at Anthony's house in Little Havana. The lights were on, and raised voices could be heard from inside. Approaching cautiously, Lucy recognized the voices of Anthony and Robert in a heated discussion. She hesitated, feeling like an intruder, but her concern overcame the embarrassment. When she was about to knock, a phrase caught her attention. "You can't do this to me," exclaimed Robert. "The contract with Horizon Gallery is practically signed. They're counting on the girl." "Without my consent or hers," retorted Anthony, his voice trembling with anger. "You're negotiating Lucy's future as if she were a commodity." "I'm securing her future. Horizon is one of the biggest galleries in the country. With predatory contracts that would tie her down for years, I won't allow you to turn Lucy into a product like you did with me." Lucy felt her blood freeze. She leaned against the wall, trying to process what she was hearing. "Is that what you think?" Robert's voice now sounded dangerously calm. "That I turned you into a product? I built your legacy, Uncle. I transformed Anthony Wilson into a globally respected brand while you drowned in self-pity after Teresa's death." "Don't dare mention her name," thundered Anthony. "Why not? It was your obsession with her that blinded you. Teresa has been dead for 30 years, and you continue living as if she were going to return at any moment. And now you've found this girl who reminds you of her, and you think you can rewrite the past." The silence that followed was so heavy that Lucy could hear her own heart beating. Then Anthony's voice, now tired and defeated. "Leave my house, Robert. Tomorrow I'll announce my definitive departure from the Foundation. You can run the empire we built as you see fit, but leave Lucy out of this." "You'll regret it," threatened Robert. "Without the Foundation behind her, your protégé will be just another mediocre artist trying to stand out." Hearing footsteps approaching the door, Lucy quickly retreated into the shadows. Robert came out, slamming the door hard, and left in his car without noticing her. For long minutes, Lucy remained motionless, debating between knocking on the door or leaving. The revelation that Robert was negotiating her future without her knowledge had left her stunned. Even more disturbing was Robert's insinuation about Anthony seeing her as a substitute for Teresa. Could it be possible? All the interest, all the support, all the connection she felt, were they just reflections of an unresolved obsession? With a heavy heart, Lucy silently moved away and walked until she found a taxi. During the journey back, images and fragments of past conversations took on new meanings under this disturbing light. The framed photo that Anthony kept so preciously, his comments about the similarities between Lucy and Teresa, the emotion in his eyes when he looked at certain works of hers. Upon arriving home, she found Tanya awake, worried about her disappearance. "What happened?" asked her friend, noticing her disturbed expression. Lucy collapsed on the sofa, feeling physically and emotionally exhausted. "I don't know who to trust anymore, Tanya, or if everything that happened in the last few months was real, or just a fantasy." As she explained what she had heard, silent tears ran down her face. Tanya listened without interrupting, firmly holding her hand. "What are you going to do?" she finally asked. Lucy wiped away the tears, a determination growing in her chest. "Tomorrow I'm going to confront him. I need to know the truth, if he sees me as Lucy or just as a ghost of Teresa." At the Ritz-Carlton, Robert Wilson was making an international call, his face a mask of cold determination. "There's been a complication," he said. "My uncle discovered the agreement with Horizon. Yes, I know what's at stake." He paused, listening. "No, it won't come to that. I have an alternative plan. The girl is his weak point, always has been. And now I've discovered that she is also his greatest vulnerability." In the little Havana house, Anthony sat alone in his studio, contemplating two paintings side by side, an old portrait of Teresa and a recent sketch of Lucy. The similarities were undeniable, not just physical, but in the energy that emanated from both, that inner flame that he had always sought to capture in his own art. "What am I doing, Teresa?" he whispered to the silence. "Am I really trying to replace you, or just trying to do this time what I couldn't do for you?" Rusty, sensing his anguish, approached and rested his head on his knee. Anthony absent-mindedly caressed the dog, lost in thoughts. Tomorrow would be the day of truth, in more than one sense. The morning of the opening of the New Talents Festival, Florida dawned with a cloudless blue sky, as if Miami wanted to gift the event with its most perfect light. From early on, the Museum of Modern Art bustled with final preparations, technical teams adjusting lights, press officers distributing credentials, waiters organizing trays for the cocktail reception that would follow the opening ceremony. Lucy arrived early, even before the doors were opened to the public. She had spent a sleepless night tossing in bed while the words she had heard at Anthony's house echoed in her mind. She wore a simple cotton dress printed with African-American motifs, made especially by a friend of Tanya's for the occasion, a choice that reflected her roots and her commitment to the authenticity she so valued in her art. Upon entering the main hall, she paused for a moment, impressed by the transformation of the space. Under the professional lighting, the works took on an almost magical dimension. Her own encounters dominated a strategic wall, visible right at the entrance, a privileged position that was certainly not accidental. "Impressive, isn't it?" Helen Martin's voice surprised her. The curator approached, already dressed for the ceremony in an elegant linen ensemble. "The space or the politics behind the arrangement of the works?" asked Lucy, with a frankness that surprised even herself. Helen raised her eyebrows, then smiled with approval. "Both. Every inch of wall in this museum is disputed territory. Your privileged location raised some eyebrows, I confess." "I didn't ask for special treatment," Lucy stated firmly. "I know," replied Helen. "It was Robert Wilson's demand. Quite insistent, in fact." She studied Lucy's face with interest. "Something tells me that's not good news for you." Lucy hesitated, uncertain about how much to reveal. "Let's say I'm discovering that there are more layers to this story than I initially imagined. In the art world, dear, there always are." Helen leaned slightly, lowering her voice. "A piece of advice. Before this day ends, many will try to define you as Wilson's protégé, as the new sensation, as the next big market bet. Don't let any of these definitions limit you. With a gentle squeeze of her arm, the curator moved away to receive other guests who were beginning to arrive. Lucy remained where she was, processing the advice, when she felt a familiar presence beside her. "You look stunning," said Anthony, looking tired but elegant in a light linen suit. Lucy turned to face him. All the questions she had rehearsed during the night suddenly stuck in her throat. At his side, Rusty wagged his tail, oblivious to the tension. "We need to talk," she finally managed to say. Anthony's expression became grave. "Yes, we do, but not here, not now. After the opening ceremony, I promise I'll clarify everything." "Clarify? What exactly?" she insisted, feeling her courage return. "The agreement with Horizon Gallery that your nephew was negotiating behind my back? Or the fact that you only became interested in me because I remind you of your late wife?" Anthony visibly paled. "You were there last night? You heard our discussion." "Enough to understand that I no longer know what's real in this whole story." The old man closed his eyes for a moment as if gathering strength. "Lucy, nothing that happened between us was false. Yes, you remind me of Teresa in many aspects, but that's not why I approached you or recognized your talent." He extended his hand, hesitant. "As for the agreement with Horizon, I swear I had no knowledge until yesterday. Robert acted on his own, and I've already made it clear that I won't allow it to happen." Before Lucy could respond, they were interrupted by a film crew from Miami News, eager to record the artistic partnership that is revolutionizing Miami's cultural scene. Forced to smile and answer superficial questions, the moment of vulnerability was broken. As the museum filled with guests, critics, collectors, established and emerging artists, local politicians, Lucy and Anthony were separated by the crowd. From a distance, she observed him interacting with the powerful of the art world, noticing how, despite his apparent discomfort, he navigated that environment with the familiarity of someone who had spent decades in it. "So you're the famous Lucy Richardson." Turning around, she found herself face to face with Claire Vanderbilt from Horizon Gallery. Up close, the woman was even more intimidating. Impeccably styled hair, perfect makeup, discreet but visibly expensive jewelry. "And you must be Claire," replied Lucy, keeping her voice firm. "I've heard quite a bit about you recently." "Ça?" Calculated smile appeared on the gallerist's lips. "Only good things, I hope." "Actually, no," retorted Lucy directly. "I heard you were negotiating my future without my knowledge or consent." Claire showed no surprise or embarrassment. "Business is like that, dear. Real talents are discovered and molded by those who understand the market. And you, definitely, have the potential to be a profitable product." "I'm not a product. Every artist is in one way or another," replied Claire with an elegant shrug. "Even your mentor, the great Anthony Wilson, eventually understood that. Why do you think he disappeared? Because he got tired of being commodified." She paused, studying. Lucy with calculating eyes. "The difference is that you could enter this game with open eyes, with someone like me to protect you from the pitfalls. Like predatory contracts signed behind my back?" Claire laughed, genuinely amused. "You have spirit. I like that. My offer still stands, Lucy. When you're ready to take your career seriously, look me up." With a polite nod, she blended into the crowd. The encounter left Lucy disturbed, but also strangely strengthened. Claire's words, though cynical, contained a truth she couldn't ignore. In this world, art rarely existed separate from commerce. The question was how to navigate that reality without losing her essence. Her thoughts were interrupted by the announcement that the opening ceremony was about to begin. Guests headed to the museum's auditorium, where a stage had been set up. In the front row, Lucy spotted Tanya, who had arrived with other friends to support her. Her heart warmed at the familiar sight. The museum director opened the ceremony with an enthusiastic speech about the importance of the festival for Florida's cultural scene. He was followed by the State Secretary of Culture and representatives of the main sponsors. Finally, Helen Martin took the stage to present the selected artists. One by one, the participants were called to the stage for a brief presentation. When Lucy's turn came, The auditorium erupted in applause more intense than normal, a reflection of the publicity that had surrounded her participation. "Lucy Richardson," announced Helen, whose work in counters is already being acclaimed, as one of the revelations of the festival, representing the unique fusion between tradition and contemporaneity that characterizes Miami's artistic scene. As she climbed onto the stage, Lucy felt the weight of all the gazes. For a brief moment, she had the vertiginous sensation of not belonging in that place, of being an imposter. Then her eyes met Anthony's in the audience, and something in the old man's expression, pride mixed with a resigned sadness, anchored her again. "Thank you," she said simply into the microphone. "It's an honor to be here, representing not just my artistic vision, but also all those who supported me on this journey, especially the South Beach community, which welcomed and inspired me." After all the artists were presented, Helen announced, "A special surprise. We have the honor of featuring a parallel exhibition of new works by Anthony Wilson, his first public collection in more than a decade. And now the master himself would like to say a few words." A murmur of excitement ran through the auditorium as Anthony took the stage. For a moment, he looked vulnerable under the spotlights, almost fragile. Then he straightened his shoulders and approached the microphone. "3 years ago," he began, his voice gaining strength with each word, "I suffered a heart attack that almost took me. In that moment, I realized that I had lost my way, not just as an artist, but as a human being. I came to Miami seeking anonymity, simplicity, a reconnection with what really matters." He paused, his eyes finding Lucy's. "Instead, I found something I didn't expect, a reason to create again." As Anthony continued his speech, Lucy noticed Robert discreetly entering the auditorium, accompanied by a group of men in suits who seemed out of place in the artistic environment. There was something in the nephew's expression that alarmed her. "And therefore," Anthony continued, "I have an important announcement to make. Today, I officially announce my definitive departure from the Wilson Foundation for the Arts." An audible shock ran through the audience. Robert, at the back of the auditorium, visibly stiffened. "In its place," Anthony proceeded, "I am creating a new project, the Teresa Wilson Free Studio, a non-commercial space dedicated to young artists without access to formal education in the arts. A place where the value of creation will not be measured by its market price, but by its authenticity and social impact." The applause that followed were thunderous. Lucy, however, couldn't take her eyes off Robert, who was now urgently conversing with the men who accompanied him, agitated gestures indicating disturbance. When Anthony came down from the stage, he was immediately surrounded by journalists and VIP guests, all eager for details about his surprising announcement. Lucy tried to approach, but the crowd was impenetrable. Instead, she found herself face to face with Robert, who had quickly approached. "We need to talk," he said, his tone urgent. "It's about Anthony." Hesitant but concerned, Lucy followed him to a side corridor, away from the crowd. The man seemed genuinely agitated, something she had never seen in the always controlled Robert. "He's making a catastrophic mistake," said Robert as soon as they were alone. "Not just for the foundation, but for himself." "For wanting to create a non-commercial space?" questioned Lucy, suspicious. "For being willing to throw away everything we built?" Robert ran his hand through his hair, a nervous gesture that made him seem strangely vulnerable. "You don't understand. The foundation is not just a business. It's Teresa's legacy, the reason my uncle got up every morning after she was gone." The mention of Teresa made Lucy stiffen. "And what does that have to do with me?" Robert studied her for a moment, as if deciding how much to reveal. "He sees in you what he lost when Teresa fell ill, not just the love of his life, but the artist she could have become if she had lived." He lowered his voice. "This is not the first time he's found a young artist and projected Teresa onto her. It's happened before." The revelation hit Lucy like a physical blow. "What?" 8 years ago in New York, he found a talented painter, not much different from you. He invested time, money, opened doors. Robert made a significant pause. "Until she didn't meet expectations, wasn't Teresa enough? And he abandoned her, just as he's about to abandon the foundation. "Why are you telling me this?" asked Lucy, her voice trembling. "Because I need you to convince him not to go through with this crazy plan of abandoning the foundation. As noble as the idea of the free studio may seem, it's impulsive and self-destructive." He looked at her intensely. "He listens to you, Lucy, more than to anyone in the last 30 years. Before she could respond, they were interrupted by the sudden arrival of Rusty, who was barking insistently, pulling at Lucy's pants with his teeth. "What is it, buddy?" she asked, relieved by the interruption. "This dog is a nuisance," muttered Robert. "Should have left him at the kennel when I had the chance." The cruel comment lit a warning in Lucy. "It was you who let Rusty loose that day, wasn't it? To distract Anthony while you negotiated with Horizon." Robert's expression hardened. Confirming her suspicion without words, Rusty continued barking, now more agitated. "Go see what he wants," Robert finally said, resigned. "But think about what I said, Lucy. There's more at stake here than your little connection with my uncle." Following the dog, who was frantically running down the corridor, Lucy found Anthony sitting alone in an empty exhibition room, apparently having escaped the tumult. Upon seeing her, he tried to smile, but the gesture didn't reach his eyes. "Your speech caused quite a stir," she said, sitting beside him. "That was the intention," he replied, caressing Rusty, who had settled at his feet. "Some things need to be destroyed for others to be born." "Like the foundation," Anthony sighed deeply. "The foundation became something I never intended it to be, a marketing machine disguised as a cultural institution. The free studio will be different." "Robert thinks you're making a mistake," Lucy said carefully. "He says that it's not the first time you've found a young artist and seen Teresa in her." Anthony's eyes widened with surprise, then filled with a deep sadness. "He told you about Mariana. It's true then?" "Partially," he admitted after a long silence. "Mariana was talented, and yes, there was something about her that reminded me of Teresa. I tried to help her, but not for the reasons Robert insinuates." "And why did you abandon her?" The question hung between them, heavy as lead. Anthony stared at his own hands, wrinkled and time-spotted. "I didn't abandon her," he finally said. "She abandoned me, and with good reason. Because I couldn't see her for who she was, only for what I projected onto her. A mistake I promised never to make again." He looked up, meeting Lucy's eyes. "A mistake I feared I was repeating with you until I realized that what attracted me to your art wasn't your similarity to Teresa, but something entirely your own. Your authenticity, your courage to be vulnerable on the canvas." There was a raw honesty in his words that disarmed Lucy. All the resentment she had built since the previous night began to dissipate. "What happened to her? To Mariana?" A sad smile touched Anthony's lips. "She's fine. Followed her own path. Away from my shadow. She has a gallery in Barcelona now. Sometimes we exchange emails." He paused. "It was after that episode that I realized how much harm I had caused trying to control the world around me. That's when I decided to disappear. And now? Now I'm trying to fix my mistakes the only way I know how." He extended his hand, hesitant. "I understand if you want to distance yourself, Lucy. If you feel that our friendship was built on false premises." Lucy contemplated the extended hand, weighing everything she had discovered. The revelations of the last 24 hours had shaken her confidence, but at the same time brought a clarity that was previously lacking. Anthony wasn't the perfect mentor she had imagined, nor the calculating manipulator that Robert had insinuated. He was just a complex man, carrying decades of joys and pains, trying to do the best he could with the time he had left. "The free studio," she finally said, accepting his hand. "Tell me more about it." The relief on Anthony's face was palpable. "It will be a space for artists like you, Lucy. Genuine talents without access to traditional networks. No contracts, no exclusivity, no market pressure, just freedom to create and grow." "And where would this space be?" "Here in Miami, of course, I have a property in Wynwood that would be perfect, and—" He hesitated, as if afraid of saying too much. "I hoped you would consider being part of it. Not as my protégé, but as a partner." Someone who shares the vision, who understands the artists we want to reach. The proposal caught her off guard. Me? But I've barely begun my own career. Exactly why. You still remember what it's like to struggle to be heard, to find your space. That perspective is invaluable. He gently squeezed her hand. Think. How about it? You don't need to answer now. Before they could continue the conversation, they were interrupted by Helen Martin's arrival. Here you are, said the curator, looking relieved. Anthony, the journalists are practically breaking down. The doors to talk to you about the announcement. And Lucy, there are some collectors very interested in your work who would like to meet you. Exchanging a knowing look, they stood up to face the tumult that awaited them. On the way back to the main hall, Lucy spotted Robert on the phone, gesturing agitatedly. Upon seeing them, he quickly hung up and approached. Uncle, we urgently need to talk, he said, ignoring Lucy. The Foundation's lawyers are here and— Later, Robert, interrupted Anthony firmly. Now is the moment to celebrate art, not discuss business. The main hall was now packed, with hundreds of people circulating among the exhibited works. Many clustered around encounters, commenting animatedly. A photographer captured the moment when Lucy approached her own work, an image that, unbeknownst to her, would grace the covers of the country's main art magazines the following week. The night progressed. Lucy was introduced to critics, collectors, and gallerists. To her surprise, she found herself able to navigate these interactions with newfound confidence. No longer intimidated by the jargon or power dynamics, she responded to questions about her work with clarity and passion. In a quiet moment, she found Tanya near the buffet, filling a plate with appetizers. "You're killing it!" exclaimed her friend, hugging her. "Everyone's talking about your work and how authentic you are in a world of falsehoods." Lucy laughed, relieved by this moment of normalcy amid the whirlwind. "It's surreal, Tanya. This morning I was questioning everything." And now? Asked Tanya, curious. "Now I'm beginning to see a path ahead that is truly mine, not what Anthony projected for me, nor what Robert tried to negotiate, nor what the art world expects. Something that makes sense for me." Tanya raised her glass in a toast. "To the authentic Lucy Richardson. She's the only one worth knowing." In the distance, Lucy spotted Anthony surrounded by admirers, Rusty faithfully by his side. The old artist seemed simultaneously in his element and slightly uncomfortable, a paradox that she now perfectly understood. "You know," she said. To Tanya, "I think I finally understand why he came to Miami, why he pretended to be just an anonymous old man on a park bench." "Why?" "Because sometimes we need to completely lose ourselves to find ourselves again." At that moment, as if sensing her gaze, Anthony turned and his eyes met hers across the crowded hall. A silent smile was exchanged, a mutual understanding that transcended words. The festival had just begun, and with it, an entirely new journey. The 3 days of the New Talents Festival of Florida passed like a feverish dream for Lucy. Her work, Encounters, quickly became one of the focal points of the event, attracting attention not only for its impressive technique, but for the story it evoked. The unlikely connection between a young artist and a reclusive master, captured in layers of color and emotion. On the afternoon of the last day, while the judges gathered to deliberate, Lucy found a moment of tranquility in the museum garden. Sitting on a stone bench under the generous shade of a century-old banyan tree, she observed Biscayne Bay shimmering in the distance. The contrast between the agitation of recent days and the serenity of this moment provided her with a clarity that had eluded her thoughts in the whirlwind of the festival. "May I join you?" asked a familiar voice. Helen Martin was approaching, looking equally exhausted and invigorated by the event's energy. Without waiting for an answer, she sat beside Lucy. "The results will be announced in an hour," commented the curator, also looking at the bay. "Nervous?" Lucy considered the question. "Strangely, no. 3 days ago I would have been trembling with anxiety. Now," she shrugged, "now I understand that the jury's recognition, although important, doesn't define my value as an artist." Helen smiled, genuinely impressed. A lesson that many take decades to learn if they ever do. She paused, carefully choosing her next words. You know, when I heard that Anthony Wilson had discovered a young artist in Miami, I was skeptical. I thought it would be just another case of a powerful man trying to shape a career in his own image. And now? Asked Lucy, curious. Now I see that something rare happened here. You two transformed each other. Helen leaned slightly. As president of the jury, I shouldn't be having this conversation, but I want you to know, your work would stand on its own merit even without Anthony's name associated with it. It's genuine, Lucy, and genuineness is the rarest commodity in the art world today. Before Lucy could respond, they were interrupted by Robert Wilson's arrival. The man seemed to have aged years in recent days, with deep circles under his eyes and an evident tension in his usually confident posture. "Dr. Martin, could you give us a moment?" he asked with forced politeness. Helen stood up, giving Lucy a questioning look which she discreetly acknowledged. "I'll be in the auditorium if you need me," said the curator before walking away. Robert occupied the place left by Helen, maintaining a respectful distance from Lucy. For a few moments he remained silent, as if organizing his thoughts. "My uncle signed the papers this morning," he finally said. "The Wilson Foundation for the Arts is now officially under my exclusive direction, and the property in Wynwood has been transferred to a new trust intended for the so-called Free Studio." The news didn't surprise Lucy. Anthony had mentioned his intention to finalize these arrangements during the festival. "I imagine you're disappointed." Robert let out a short laugh without humor. "Disappointed? It's an inadequate word to describe how I feel." He turned to face her directly. "You don't understand what he's doing, Lucy. The foundation is not just a business. It's the last tangible link between my uncle and Teresa, the project that kept them together even after she was gone." There was a vulnerability in Robert's voice that Lucy had never perceived before. For the first time, she saw beyond the facade of the cold, calculating executive. She saw the nephew who had grown up in the shadow of an almost mythical relationship, trying to preserve what remained of it. "He's not abandoning Teresa's legacy," Lucy said softly. "He's returning to its essence. The Free Studio is the continuation of their original dream, not the end." "That's what he says," Robert replied bitterly. "But what about the foundation? 30 years of work, of building an internationally respected name?" "It will continue in your hands," completed Lucy. "And from what Anthony told me, there's no one more capable of managing it. You transformed the foundation into a powerhouse in the art world. Now it's your moment to define your own legacy with it." Robert studied her with surprise, clearly not expecting empathy from her. "He said that I'm capable?" "He said you understand the business world in a way he never did," confirmed Lucy, "and that the foundation needs that to survive in the current landscape." A thoughtful silence established itself between them. In the distance, they could hear the buzz of the public beginning to gather for the winner's announcement. "We should go," Robert finally said, standing up. "Regardless of who wins today, you've become a name to be watched, Lucy. Horizon's offer still stands with or without my uncle's blessing." "Thank you, but I'm not interested," she replied firmly. "I prefer to build my career on my own terms." Atelier. Ironic smile touched Robert's lips. "Exactly as he said you would respond." He extended his hand in an unexpected gesture. "Good luck, Lucy Richardson. Something tells me we'll meet again." The auditorium was completely packed for the festival's closing. On the stage, an arrangement of chairs awaited the judges and organizers. Lucy found her place in the front row next to Anthony and Rusty, who had gained unofficial mascot status at the event after his stellar performance at the opening ceremony. "Ready?" asked Anthony, gently squeezing her hand. "For any outcome," she replied with a serene smile. The ceremony began with formal thanks to sponsors and supporters. Then, Helen Martin took the microphone to announce the winners, starting with honorable mentions and secondary categories. The tension in the auditorium was palpable when the moment for the grand prize finally arrived. "The jury had an extraordinarily difficult task this year," said Helen, looking at the attentive audience. "The quality of the works presented exceeded all expectations, demonstrating the vitality of Florida's and America's artistic scene. Lucy felt Anthony's hand squeeze hers more firmly. However, one work stood out, not only for its impeccable technique, but for the emotional depth and cultural relevance it presents. A work that speaks of encounters, of human connections, of how relationships can transform lives. A murmur of anticipation ran through the auditorium. The grand prize of this year's New Talents Festival of Florida goes to Julian Ferris for Ancestry. A moment of stunned silence was followed by enthusiastic applause as a young black artist, visibly moved, rose from his seat a few rows behind. Lucy joined the applause sincerely, admiring the mentioned work. AAT, powerful installation that merged elements of African-American culture with contemporary techniques. "Are you okay?" asked Anthony, his face showing more disappointment than her own. Lucy smiled, genuinely at peace. "I'm great. Ancestry is an extraordinary work. Julian deserves this victory." After receiving his award and giving an emotional speech about representation in the arts, Julian came down from the stage, briefly stopping to hug Lucy. "Your work was my favorite," he whispered. "See you on the circuit." The ceremony ended with a special announcement. Lucy Richardson's work, Encounters, had been acquired by the Museum of Modern Art of Florida for its permanent collection, an honor rarely granted to artists at the beginning of their careers. The news brought tears to Lucy's eyes, a validation that in a way meant more than the main prize itself. "Now your art belongs to the city that inspired it," murmured Anthony, not hiding the pride in his voice. The closing cocktail reception extended into the night. Lucy circulated among guests, receiving congratulations and exchanging contacts with gallerists, curators, and other artists. To her surprise, she no longer felt like the imposter she had feared being. She moved in that environment with a quiet confidence, anchored in the certainty of her own worth. Near midnight, when the party began to disperse, Anthony found her on the terrace, admiring the city lights. "Ready to go?" "I have a surprise for you," he said, Rusty faithfully by his side. Intrigued, Lucy followed him to a taxi that awaited them. During the journey, Anthony remained mysteriously silent, answering her questions only with enigmatic smiles. When the car stopped, they were in the heights of Wynwood before a large wrought-iron gate. "We've arrived," announced Anthony, paying the driver. "What is this place?" asked Lucy, observing the large property that extended beyond the gate. In the dimness of night, she could make out an old building, a kind of partially ruined colonial mansion. "The future Teresa Wilson Free Studio," replied Anthony, opening the gate with an old key. "Or at least, it will be when we finish the renovation." They entered the property, illuminated only by the full moon and the flashlight on Anthony's cell phone. The space was much larger than Lucy had imagined, almost a small campus, with the main building and several smaller structures scattered throughout the wooded grounds. "This is incredible," she murmured, turning slowly to absorb the magnitude of the place. How many artists could work here? At least 20 in simultaneous residence, plus spaces for classes, exhibitions, performances. Anthony seemed rejuvenated by enthusiasm. "The architectural project is being finalized. The idea is to preserve the historic structure, but adapt it for contemporary needs. Solar energy, rainwater harvesting, sustainable materials." They walked through the grounds while Anthony detailed his vision for the space. With each shared detail, Lucy realized how much he had thought about this project long before meeting her. "This place was Teresa's, wasn't it?" she finally asked when they stopped in front of the main building. Anthony nodded, emotional. "We bought it together shortly before her diagnosis. We had the dream of creating a space for young artists, away from the commercial pressures of New York." He paused, contemplating the mansion. "After she left, I didn't have the courage to do anything with the property. It seemed wrong to proceed without her. And now? Now I understand that the biggest mistake was abandoning our original dream." He turned to Lucy, his eyes shining under the moonlight. "I needed to meet you to realize this, to rediscover what really matters in art and in life." The emotion in Anthony's voice touched Lucy deeply. It's an enormous responsibility. It's not a responsibility, it's an invitation, he gently corrected. I want you to be part of this, Lucy. Not as my protégé or successor, but as a partner, someone who shares the vision and can carry it forward when I'm no longer here. The proposal hung between them, loaded with meaning. Lucy contemplated the space around, imagining the possibilities. Young people from all backgrounds finding here a refuge to create, learn, grow. A place where art would be valued for its ability to transform, not for its market price. Yes, she finally answered. I want to be part of this. Anthony's smile illuminated his wrinkled face. Rusty, as if understanding the importance of the moment, barked happily, running in circles around them. There's one more thing, said Anthony, removing an envelope from the inside pocket of his jacket. This is for you. Curious, Lucy opened the envelope. Inside she found legal documents that left her breathless, official papers naming her co-owner of the property and co-founder of the Teresa Wilson Free Studio. Anthony, this is... I can't accept something so valuable. It's not a gift, Lucy. It's an investment in the future we dream of together. His voice was firm, resolute. Teresa would have approved. In fact, I'm sure she would have adored you. The words touched something, deep in Lucy, not jealousy or discomfort, as she might have felt days before, but a feeling of connection with a woman she had never known, but whose legacy she would now help perpetuate. Thank you, she said simply, knowing that no words could adequately express what she felt. 6 months later, the Teresa Wilson Free Studio opened its doors with an inaugural exhibition that brought together works by established and emerging artists, including new creations by Anthony and Lucy. The event attracted national attention, not only for the quality of the exhibited works, but for the innovative model it proposed, a space genuinely dedicated to art as a tool for social transformation. The old mansion, now carefully restored, housed studios, classrooms, a small amphitheater, and an exhibition gallery. At the back of the property, small residences welcomed artists selected for the residency program, young talents from peripheral communities across the United States who otherwise would not have access to professional guidance and adequate space to create. The first class of residents included Julian Ferris, the festival winner, who had declined lucrative offers from commercial galleries to participate in the project. Here I can create with freedom, without thinking about market trends, he explained during the opening ceremony. It's a luxury that few artists have today. Tanya also found her place at the studio, coordinating African-American dance workshops. That integrated movement, music and visual arts. Her contagious energy brought a community dimension to the space, attracting people from the neighborhood and transforming the studio into a true cultural hub. To the surprise of many, Robert Wilson attended the inauguration, accompanied by foundation representatives. After months of tense negotiations, an agreement had been established. The Wilson Foundation for the Arts would be an official partner of the Free Studio, providing logistical and institutional support without interfering in its creative autonomy. It's a new beginning for all of us, commented Robert during the ceremony, his relationship with his uncle visibly more harmonious after the mutual recognition of their complementary roles. As the opening night progressed, Lucy found a moment to escape from the crowd and climb to the mansion's rooftop terrace. From there, she had a privileged view of Biscayne Bay, the city lights reflecting on the dark waters. The sea breeze carried with it Miami's characteristic aroma, salt, jasmine, food, a mixture that had become part of her in recent years. Thought I'd find you here, said Anthony, joining her on the terrace. Rusty, now slower due to his advanced age, faithfully accompanied him. You always seek height when you need to think. Lucy smiled, recognizing how well he knew her. I'm just absorbing everything. It seems like a dream, you know? A year ago I was just a waitress with artistic ambitions, and now you're a respected artist, co-founder of an innovative cultural institution, and inspiration for dozens of young talents, completed Anthony, leaning on the parapet beside her. And most importantly, you achieved all this without compromising who you are. Below, the sound of the party continued. Music, laughter, animated conversations. Artists, students, supporters, all gathered to celebrate not just the opening of a physical space, but the birth of an idea. "You know what impresses me most?" commented Lucy. "How it all began with a simple coffee in South Beach Square. And an intrusive rusty dog," added Anthony, caressing the head of his faithful companion. "Sometimes the most meaningful encounters begin in the simplest ways." They remained in comfortable silence, contemplating the city that had witnessed their transformations. Miami, with its contrasts, its history, its vibrant energy, was not just the backdrop for their individual journeys, but an active character in them, shaping them as much as they had left their marks on it. "What do you think Teresa would say if she could see all this?" Lucy asked softly. Anthony closed his eyes for a moment, as if listening to a voice that only he could hear. "She would say, 'Finally, Anthony, finally you understood.'" The words hung in the night air, loaded with meaning. They weren't just about the free studio, but about the entire journey that had brought them there. A journey of loss and rediscovery, of unexpected connections, of second chances. "And you?" asked Anthony, turning to face her. "What would you say to the Lucy of a year ago if you could talk to her?" Lucy considered the question, looking at Miami's starry sky. "I would tell her to trust herself more, to understand that her voice matters, that her art has value regardless of who recognizes it." She made a reflective pause. "And to always be open to unexpected encounters, because they are what truly transform our lives." Rusty barked softly, as if agreeing with the shared wisdom. Below, someone was calling for them. It was time to return to the celebration, to the plans, to the shared dreams that were now taking concrete form. Descending the stairs side by side, mentor and apprentice, now equal partners, exchanged a look of mutual understanding. The path they had traveled together was just beginning, but